This is our AI myths and reality session, and what I really want to do is help people who have been a bit reticent about AI to find some confident first steps on their journey towards starting to use it and embrace it. And even if you are using AI already, you might find that there are some things we talk about today that you weren't necessarily as aware of, or that you want to go and explore later as well. So I'm Sam Forsberg. I'm one half of Corvus Dynamic. I was really blessed to be chosen as one of 13 tech leaders in Scotland to be sent out to Silicon Valley in August of 2024. And that trip was really about immersing myself in the tech ecosystem out there. And it changed my life and my business. And I realised that I went out very AI reticent. I'm an absolute geek. I love technology, but I didn't really trust what we were seeing back then. And I came back going, okay, this is absolutely inevitable. They're so far ahead of us in America that we were only just starting to really dabble with things and start to hear about them in the news, and they were so much further ahead. And I realized that if that felt overwhelming for me as a self-confessed tech geek, that small businesses and employees in jobs that were going to be required to use AI were going to find that a bit overwhelming too. So that started our journey and transition towards AI training and consultancy. So we're going to cover a few things today. We're going to have a bit of a look at the difference between the promise and the reality of where we're at currently. We'll cover 5 AI myths that I think are really important, and then explore 3 different areas of ethics and risks that you might want to be aware of, and maybe explore a bit more if you're going to be using AI in your job or your business. And then we'll look at some confident first steps that will help you move forward with what we've covered. There is a resource, a 3-question framework, which we'll share a link that you'll be able to download later on as well. But if you wouldn't mind in the chat, can you just pop in and let me know, in terms of using AI, is it something that you've not used yet? Is it something you've dabbled with? You've maybe tried a tool like ChatGPT, but you're not really sure if it's right for what you need? Or you've been using it and you're a bit disappointed with results? Or are you one of the people who absolutely love it already? So just pop into the chat and let us know. And Kezia, if you're able to share that.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got, I've not used it yet, dabbler, I love it. Use it all the time. I love it, such a time saver. Using some tools in depth, ChatGPT and Synthesia, and love it. There are a few limited use cases. Synthesia is great. I've not heard of that one, so I'll have to check that out. Used
Brilliant.
it and it has been useful, not that cognizant of how it works.
Fab. So quite a mix there, and that tends to be the case when I speak to people about AI. There's people who haven't really touched it yet, maybe are a little bit uncertain about it. People who have been dabbling and just aren't really sure where it's right to use it or apply it in a professional context. Others that are really diving into a tool and making the most of it, and obviously people who are big fans of it as well. So we'll cover stuff that I think will be relevant to all of you today. So let's start with the promise versus the reality. And I think one of AI's biggest promises is that it is going to save us hours of time every day. It's this big time-saving tool. And what's really interesting is that the more I started using AI, the more I realized there was a bit of a paradox going on. And where I thought it would save me time, actually, I found that some tasks were taking longer. So this productivity paradox is actually borne out in the research that's being done. And so it's a really complex time equation around, it's not just simply that it will save you time on tasks. It very much depends on the task. It very much depends on the sort of depth that you're going to with the task. So effectively, research has shown up to this point that if you're doing fairly routine, fairly mundane or repetitive tasks, or getting something like a first draft of something done, then AI can save you some time in those sort of smaller skilled context spots. But when you're starting to use it for something that's a bit more complex, something that's a bit more nuanced, we tend to find the opposite happens. It actually doesn't save time. It often takes longer to do a task. And there's quite a few reasons for that, which we'll explore a little bit later. So it's much more of a complex time equation as to whether you may save time or not. It's not a guarantee that it will save you more time and make you more productive. The second promise that I think is maybe not spoken, but it's almost inherently assumed, is that AI is so accurate. You're going to get answers that are correct. And we have heard in the news about things like hallucinations where AI has made stuff up. But I don't think a lot of people understand why that's the case. So unlike typical technology, we've all grown up with tech, and we understand that when you double click an icon, it opens an application, or you click send on an email and it will send that email, or you do some formatting in Microsoft Word, you're expecting that formatting task to work. So it's very much been a logic flow. If this, then that, else something else. And so we've been able to rely that if we do something, we will get the same result time and time again. And AI is not a technology like that. In fact, if you put two requests, two prompts into a large language model tool that are exactly the same, you will get slightly different results each time. And the reason for this is that AI, and in this case, I'm talking about large language models. So things like your ChatGPT, your Claude by Anthropic, Gemini from Google, that includes a bit the AI search within the Google search environment. And there's lots of other tools that are similar, but these large language models, they are predictive technology. So they're not perfect. They don't know the answers. They don't have completely accurate information. And it's a bit like, if you think about prediction, at best case, you've got a forecast and maybe an informed estimate. Worst case, you've got a guess or a divination. And AI can really sort of cover that range, that spectrum of results, because it's trained on huge quantities of data, but the quality of that data can be variable. And we might find that actually it is not up to date, or it's making stuff up because it's trying to be helpful, or it might actually provide some accurate data but present it in a way that is actually incorrect. So it's not perfectly accurate, and we do need to use human oversight if we're relying on AI in our jobs and our businesses. I think one of the next kind of promises is that it's going to solve all our problems. Personally and in work, we'll be able to use it for everything. And certainly what we're finding with the current level of tools is that it's really important to have the right tool for the right job. So ChatGPT obviously came to popularity. It was the first one that hit our kind of public awareness and became more ubiquitous. But it's only one of the tools, and it's good at some things, but every tool has both their own strengths and their own weaknesses. So if you're only using one tool and you're trying to apply that to every task, you're going to get better results on some and worse results on others than if you'd perhaps looked at finding the right tool for the right task. We'll also come back to the fact that AI is not right for every task, and there are some tasks that you really don't want to put AI anywhere near. And I think one of the key skills going forward will be that strategic and critical thinking capability to decide whether AI is right for a particular use case or not. And then there's the idea that AI is giving us that immediate return on investment. So whether that is time saved, whether that is more revenue generated or some other benefit, the idea that it's instantly providing those gains to businesses or to employees in a role is really not being borne out in the research at the moment. What tends to happen is that we get slower, maybe more strategic gains over time, but it takes a lot of trial and error and a lot of really working with it to find the ways that that benefit can be delivered. So today is about trying to cut through some of this hype to help you understand the realities and the truths behind the technology that we're talking about when we use the words AI at the moment, and help you to make some more informed decisions in your roles about it. So yeah, it's not quite as perfect as it's been made out to be. So let's start exploring the 5 myths that I wanted to share with you today. And the first one is, that AI knows everything. And these days, a lot of the tools now have the ability to search the internet. So they're not limited to that billions of bits of data that they've been trained on that I referenced earlier. But because AI is predictive, it is looking at, if I have these words in an order, in a sentence, what do I think the next best word is to deliver in response to that? So it's predicting word by word what the response should be based on that large amount of data that it's been trained on. So that means that the results are going to trend more towards a kind of a common denominator, a sort of a middle ground, that they are going to be dependent on the data that it has been trained on. And one of the big challenges we're going to have over time is that AI is now being trained, because it needs so much data, that it's going to be trained more and more on AI generated content and data. So actually, if we're saying that AI created content is not completely accurate, and yet we're then starting to train models on AI created content, we've got the risk of degradation of quality that's going to happen as these models become hungrier and hungrier. So the variability of that data does have an impact. And AI doesn't know everything. It can do internet searches, but that doesn't mean it will find all of the relevant information. It doesn't mean that the information presented is accurate. So we've really got to apply our own critical thinking and analysis to what it gives us, and make sure that we're actually happy that it is accurate and correct and suitable for the purpose or the context that we're using it for. So the myth about AI saving us time and delivering this return on investment. So I mentioned the productivity paradox, and so what they found in research is that simple, lower skilled tasks, AI can really improve productivity by about 35% in some cases. But for things where it is a little bit more complex, you're relying on a bit more context, it is a bit more nuanced, it tends to have the opposite effect. So it actually will not save time, or will take you even longer for a task. And part of that is because AI looks at so much stuff, it has access to so much information, that we might look at a task and go, okay, well, here are 3 things I want to consider. AI might look at the same task and go, well, here are 10 things you can consider. So we end up getting scope creep coming in, and we go, oh, actually, that's really interesting. That's a good point. I should add that in. Or we might spend more time refining and editing and tweaking the content that it's generating for us, so that whilst the first draft might be really quick and feel very productive, the effort that we then have to apply to make that fit for purpose, and the human oversight we have to apply, can reduce that actual productivity gain. And we also find that with some of the more complex tasks, the quality of the output when a human is working with that AI generated content and really tweaking it and improving it and making sure that it is accurate and fit for purpose, that the quality of that can actually increase. So that again means we might be getting a better quality output. It might be taking us a bit longer. So you've got that dilemma of, am I looking to get a really quick win here and save some time, or am I wanting a better quality output, knowing that it might take me longer than if I was doing this more manually? So there's a massive productivity paradox happening there. I think one of the next ones that we're still seeing quite a bit of is, oh, AI, I can ignore it, or it's only for big businesses. It's not relevant to me in my role or to my small business. But the reality is, it is absolutely inevitable. It is here to stay. It's already here in ways that we probably haven't even been aware of. It's been in our inboxes for a long time. It's been on our phones for a long time, and yet we haven't really thought of it or recognized it as AI. And it's getting involved in more and more aspects of our lives and our working careers. So there are very few sectors that are not being touched by AI. There's very few jobs that are not being touched by AI. And in a really positive way, AI can help to level that playing field for small business and for people who are in roles where they feel the need to deliver more than they've been able to up to this point, because there's a lot of pressure on us to improve our productivity. So it can help to make us more effective or able to compete against bigger businesses, for example. But we have to learn how to use it effectively in order to achieve those benefits. Myth 3 to 5. I can use AI tools for everything. And this comes back to what I said earlier about, I think one of the key skills is going to be, how do you choose the right tool for the right task? So how do you assess which tool is going to be most appropriate and give you the best results for the task that you're trying to achieve or work on, for the outcome that you want to get from it, whether it's about time saving, whether it's about quality improvement, how important is that accuracy? And a big part of that comes back to understanding risk and to risk management. We're going to touch on that a little bit later as well. But AI is not right for every task. And there really are some tasks that you shouldn't put AI anywhere near because the risks are too significant. So being able to determine that is a really important skill going forward that I think we all need to develop. And also, it's really important to try different tools, not just to rely on one, but to experiment, to see what the strengths and weaknesses are of different tools and how they maybe fit what you're trying to achieve. Because one person trying to do a particular task in one business might want a particular outcome or a particular tone or a particular quality, and that might be different to somebody in another business doing the same task. So it's really about finding the right tools for what it is that you're trying to achieve. And when we think about tasks and productivity and start thinking about workflows, so it's not just one task, but it's a series of steps that form a bigger task, it might be that actually AI can really help with 2 or 3 of the steps in that 5 or 6 step process, but there might be a couple of steps where AI isn't going to help or really isn't appropriate. So actually being able to break tasks down and then decide, okay, well, I'll use AI in these places, but make sure that a human is doing the critical things in these other places in order to get the best results. And that again comes back to risk management as well. And the final myth I really wanted to look at today is around this idea that I need to be really technical to use AI. And I think the reality is that we need to be able to think strategically. We need to be able to think critically to analyze stuff, not just take something that we're given and accept that that's correct and accurate and that we can rely on it. We need to be really using our brains. And actually research is already starting to show that if we just take something that AI gives us and don't apply that critical thinking to it, that we are actually going to make ourselves dumber. Our brains are going to lose the ability to think critically, to retain information, and that affects us as adults and professionals, but it also will affect children in education as well. So this idea that we want to be challenging the content that AI creates and really think about it at different levels and make sure that we are confident with our professional expertise that it's accurate is really, really important. And apologies if you can hear the yowling in the background. We haven't got feline visitors, we've got feline exclamations in the background. And I think this is less about coding capabilities. We hear a lot about AI helping programmers, or in fact the suggestion is that it might replace programmers. And there's a really interesting sort of dilemma happening where AI is giving some of us the ability to do stuff that we never would have been able to do before. So you could use a no-code or a low-code tool to create an application or something that you wouldn't have ever dreamed of being able to do because you have not got any programming expertise or experience. But the challenge is that whilst it can create some stuff and it looks like it might work, if you don't have the technical underpinning and skills behind it, you're not going to know if it works. You're not going to be able to troubleshoot it properly. You're probably going to find that it's got security issues and other things that you haven't even considered because it's not your area of expertise. So I think that being able to think strategically, do the critical analysis, and improve our prompting skills to some extent are going to be important. Although prompting can be assisted by AI as well. So there's things that we can do to get the AI to help us create better prompts to get better results as well. So those are the myths I really wanted to tackle today. And I think this is where it's important to explore some of the things that we all really need to be aware of if we're using AI. So we're going to start looking at 3 areas of ethics and risk just now as well. So one of the first areas of ethics that I think is important to be aware of is that there is bias in the AI tools that we might be using. Because it's trained on these billions of bits of data, any data that humans have created and that AI is now generating as well reflects inherent bias. Now that bias could be historical, it could be racial, it could be gender bias, it could be economic bias. There could be lots of other areas of bias that exist because of the data that the models are being trained on. And so we need to be aware of this and think about how we can use our prompting skills to be able to challenge or question the biases or ask, what might not be being said here? What might the assumptions be underlying what the response is that the AI has generated for you? So being aware of that bias is important. I think increasingly it's important to disclose AI use. And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. What are people going to think? Am I going to be judged? Are they going to devalue my effort if I've used AI? And I think we're at a situation where trust is at a premium. Our business relationships, our working relationships are really based on trust. And it's quite easy for us to look at something and kind of go, that sort of sounds like that's AI generated, or what, that doesn't really sound like that person. I'm not sure that they've written that. So we're subconsciously or consciously already going to have these filters and doubts about content generated by AI. So if we're upfront, if we disclose that we're using it, we're being transparent, I think we've got a real opportunity professionally to convey that sense of trust. And so I've got disclosure statements that I use when I'm creating content or using AI assistance on tasks that I share, that I've used AI assistance for certain purposes, but that any advice or important information is human expertise driven and checked for accuracy, etc. And I think that's something that can really help us differentiate ourselves in the professional world at the moment, because it's not the norm, it's not common practice at the moment, but I think it's going to become increasingly important. And I've mentioned human oversight, this idea that AI isn't accurate, it doesn't know the answers, it doesn't understand what it's giving us. It's designed to give us plausible sounding responses. It's designed to be helpful. Plausible and helpful does not equal accurate. So when we understand that, and it delivers those responses really confidently, and it can make stuff up, so that human oversight is essential. And the more risky an output or an outcome from a task could possibly be, the more important it is that we have a human in the loop and we have human oversight in place. We've all seen, I'm sure, news articles where people in legal professions have been relying on cases and precedents that they've researched on AI. AI has hallucinated those precedents, and the person has been professionally reprimanded for effectively breaching their code of conduct because they've relied on something that wasn't accurate. So it's just a little bit of a warning to us all that that human oversight remains really critical. We can use AI to augment our skills and abilities. We don't want to abdicate our judgment and our responsibility and our decision making to the tools, because they're definitely not at a stage where they can handle that. And I'm really passionate about data protection and privacy. I think it's an important topic, and it's something that still gets a little bit ignored. But there's big risks when it comes to AI. You know, what happens to the data that you put into an AI tool? What happens to any documents or content you share? What happens to the contact details or names of people that you're putting into it? And I don't think those questions are being asked quite enough. Now, when we're talking about data, so we've got personally identifiable information. That could be about us, it could be about staff and employees, it could be about prospects, it could be about customers. Are we sure that that data is safe and that we have permission to put that into AI tools? What about commercially sensitive information, intellectual property, you know, things that actually, if these were publicly posted somewhere, you know, that would actually be a risk or a detriment to the business or organization we work for. So these are the sorts of things that we need to be considering. And actually, a lot of tools, AI tools these days, have standard terms and conditions that mean that they by default train their model on your data. So what does that mean? Well, I like to talk about that as when you put in a prompt, and so you give it some instructions, you maybe add some documents or some context to give it extra information so that it's a bit more helpful. You're maybe giving it access to systems or tools. That information, all of that, and anything it generates for you goes into what I call the universal soup. So it's this collective mass of data that, in principle, anybody else using that AI tool could then possibly get that as part of a response that the AI generates for them. So if you're not aware of that, if you're not checking terms and conditions, if you're not looking at the settings and making sure that you've turned off training the model on your data, then that is a significant risk. And it's a little bit sad that these are often hidden under fairly euphemistic terms. So if you go into the settings for a lot of AI tools, there'll be something along the lines of, I'm happy to help improve this model for everyone. Now, that doesn't sound inherently risky. It doesn't sound like a statement that is telling you anything you give me, any data you share with me is going to be made effectively publicly available. But if you're not willing to post something on LinkedIn or hand it out in the street to strangers, if you're not comfortable that that information is something that you'd be happy with anybody accessing, you should be thinking twice before you put it into an AI tool. Now, there are obviously settings that can be used. There's exceptions to this. So Copilot from Microsoft does not train its model on your data, and it has the ecosystem where you get the protection of all of the other Microsoft products, and data that you share with it is slightly more protected than perhaps on some other systems. But we need to be thinking about this if we want to be using the tools safely. And I mentioned terms and conditions, and this is a really key point, because the vast majority of people don't ever read terms and conditions for any product or service we buy. But terms and conditions are legally binding, and actually, when it comes to AI, if you're not reading them, then there are hidden risks that are particularly risky for AI tools because of things like training the model on your data. Another example of this, and so this is a case of where what you don't know can really hurt you or your employer or your business. And an example of this is that I wanted to go and create a logo for a tool that we've developed, and I just needed something really quick and simple, a bit of a placeholder. And so I thought, right, when I was in America, I heard about a couple of really popular image generation tools. So let me just go and have a look at them. And I went to the most popular one that I'd heard a lot about, checked the pricing and things, and I thought, okay, great, I'm going to be able to create something here that should really work for about $20. That's not too bad. I'm happy with that as a premise. But before I did anything else, I went and checked the terms and conditions. And actually, looking at that was horrifying, because what it said was, if you use our service, you grant us an irrevocable global license to do anything we want with anything you give us and anything we generate for you. So they've got permission to sell it, to give it to others, to use it in marketing, to change it and give it to other people, whatever they want. Irrevocable means you cannot take that back. You cannot ask them to stop doing it. You cannot reverse that. And it's for the prompts you give it. It's for any images or photos you upload. It's for any context you give it. So in my case, I was looking to create a logo, which is by definition a branded, copyrighted, business representative image. And yet I wouldn't own the rights to that. So it was fundamentally unfit for the purpose that I was looking for. And it took me checking a few different tools before I found one that I was then able to use for that purpose. So it really is important to look at the terms and conditions before you use AI tools. Now, the problem there is that we may not even understand the risks that are hidden in those terms. So the product I just mentioned, the first AI product that we built, is called Termsinator, and it's designed to help analyze standard terms and conditions, to look for consumer protection principles, to look for things that businesses might want to be aware of before they agree to use a service. So if you're unsure, if you're really not wanting to read through what's typically legal jargon and pages of small print, then having something like Termsinator that can check those for you and at least flag up some of the key things that you might want to consider before you use a service can help and hopefully take some of that burden away. One of the key takeaways is garbage in, garbage out. So if models are trained on data that's not accurate, that's going to affect their outputs. But equally, if we're putting in poor quality prompts or data from our businesses that isn't really particularly good quality data, we're not going to get the sort of quality of responses out of it that we want. It is predictive. It doesn't know the answers, so it does need oversight, and we do need to constructively challenge and critically think about and analyze the things that it's producing for us. We need to choose wisely. AI isn't right for all tasks, and not all tools are right for all tasks either. So it's about making sure that we know how to make those decisions in order to get the best out of AI and to protect the businesses and organizations we work for, and ourselves personally. But it is here to stay. It's absolutely inevitable. We are all going to find that it affects us in our personal lives, in our working lives. So being able to understand a bit about it, start that journey of experimenting with it and using it safely and ethically is really important. So a couple of things that you can do for your first steps if you haven't been using AI yet is to really look at what are the sorts of tasks that you do that are a bit routine, repetitive, and low risk, so that if something went wrong, if AI produced something that wasn't accurate or there was an issue, the risk of that and the impact of that risk happening is relatively low. And that's typically a good place to start. Then we want to look at evaluating, is AI right for this task and what tool might be most appropriate for it? And as I mentioned earlier, do we need to break this task down into smaller steps and just pick which of the steps are appropriate for AI where human oversight might be needed in others? And then finally, adopting it safely, understanding some of the ethical considerations I raised. Start small. Measure the sorts of results and outcomes you're getting, the things that you need to do to get better responses. Iterate it, because if we're expecting a perfect result first time out the gate, we're very unlikely to get that. We're going to need to work on it, tweak it, improve our prompting, and that iteration process can then be fed back in to help us get better results next time round as well. So there is the online course. I really encourage you. I think Kezia's put the link in to sign up for that if you haven't already done so. It covers what we've talked about today. If you want to go back and recap that or see the recording from today, then that's all available for you for free on the WebiNeve platform. And we also have a 3-question risk and reward template that we're sharing a resource for you that can help you start to assess which tasks you might want to apply AI to. And so if you go to webineve.corvusdynamic.co.uk, you can pop your name and email in, and we will share that template with you as well. So thank you for being here with us today. If you've got any questions, I'd love to take them. And yeah, please see this as an opportunity to up-level your skills, your thinking about AI, and look at where you can use it safely and ethically to help you in your jobs and your businesses.